Hello and welcome to the Swing Smarter Monthly Newsletter. This is your host, Joey Myers from hittingperformancelab.com. And I have the honor to have a guest on of mine who I've been on his stuff quite a bit, Mr. Coach Bill Masullo. So welcome to the show first, Bill.
Oh, thank you, Joey. Thank you for having me here. Love it, love it, love it.
And so one of the big reasons why I wanted Coach Bill on is Bill runs an academy, a decent sized academy. It's been around for a while, and I'm going to have him go into that, just give you the little details in case you're in his general area over there in the Pennsylvanias. But I wanted to have Bill on because I wanted to go in. I know I have some academy owners that follow me, and I know there's some out there maybe just starting or wanting to start their own hitting academy or baseball, softball academy. And so I think Bill's knowledge of this and his School of Hard Knocks knowledge will be invaluable in this. So first, I want to start off, Bill. I want you to just give me your sales pitch on you guys' academy, what you guys do, where you guys are located, and, kind of go from there.
Sure. I run a facility. It's known as GoodSports, and we are located in central Pennsylvania. So if you can picture Pennsylvania as a somewhat of a square looking type of state, little rectangular, and you stick your finger right in the middle of that, that's where you would find us. And so we're just a little bit north of Penn State University. Most people have heard of that.
Yep.
So I began in a very roundabout way. So I'm a little bit of an outsider when it comes to this whole baseball thing. I coached hockey for 25 years, 26 years in all honesty. I was too small of a guy to play baseball. So nobody wants a light hitting second baseman. So, but what I noticed along the way was I noticed I'm very much a contrarian by nature. So I noticed a lot of information that I didn't think was good information or correct information. And then when it was acted upon by the player sort of got a little bit of grief. And I just always sort of thought, hey, I can do that a little bit better with a little bit of a different outcome. And we've been successful in that regards. Everything we do is either small group or one-on-one. I'm not, I don't promote travel teams as such. So we just train. That is what we do. So it's a little bit different in that regard.
I love that. And I know, how long has it been since you started following me or any of the other ones that we'll talk about in this call?
Joey, I'm trying to even figure out how I got there. I'm going to say it's been at least 10 years.
Yeah.
At least, right? I mean, going right back to the very first book that you put out. I think what attracted me to you, and I get attracted to these types
Harry
types of
Husband,
mavericks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Matt Noakes.
Yeah. Guys that are out there saying, speaking what no one else is talking about. And you've always heard me say, with you, it was always, well, let me prove it. Let me go grab some baseballs and let's set something up formally and let's take a look at it and let's see if that's true or not. And I thought, wow, if a guy's going to get that deep into it, that's the guy that I want to understand. And you went to movement, and I just thought, you know what, that's a piece of the puzzle that everyone wants to neglect, and not knowingly, but it's just sort of like, oh, so. And I know that's how I got to you. I don't know when that was. I had hair
at the time. Well, I think that's interesting. And that was when I first did it. I didn't want to come from a background where I wanted to push my Fresno State background. Now, if you go on my About page, I do mention that, but I don't say, listen to me because I went to Fresno State, because I know there's going to be somebody else saying, well, I played for the Blue Jays for 10 years. So I trump your 4 years playing Division I college baseball. And then for that person, well, I made 3 all-star game appearances. And so it's this shouting match that whoever can shout the loudest, whoever got to the top, whoever, in that sense, we should be all listening to Bonds and Aaron. And so, although I do agree with a lot of what they say, I think it gets misconstrued, but this idea of going out and prove it. And I think what you're saying is that a lot of the instructors out there, gurus, whatever you want to call them, the guys at the top of the food chain, I guess, and the gals, that it is a dogma. They've created a system that is so much of a dogma that they can't save face and go opposite of what they said. And I think early on when I did the swing experiments, I said, hey, I'm stumbling on this new stuff. Let's challenge it and let's do a little swing experiment and say, okay, let's see what happens if we do this and then the opposite of this, and then see how the numbers roll out. And I, like you said, I always tell people, find out, do it on your own. Don't take my word for it. I don't want to be the bottleneck. Go do it on your own. Do you guys do different experiments and stuff like that in you guys' thing? Do you show those kids like a part of your learning process?
Absolutely. And, and obviously sprinkled with a lot of self-deprecating humor. Because at the end
That's
of the
what I like
day,
about you.
well, I don't ever want to take myself seriously.
Exactly.
And I jokingly tell my kids this all the time, right? I mean, you certainly don't want to hit the way I hit.
Right.
So let's try to get to the information. I want my kids to experiment quite a bit. So yes. And I would say probably the biggest fight I have is just knocking the kids over the head a little bit gently, but with the idea of logging, doing experiments on their own. So we're always trying to that idea of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So yeah. And I would say I have learned far more from those kids than they have ever learned from me. So,
I love that. And speaking from an academy owner's point of view, and I know, like you said, you're not really into the travel ball teams. It's more of the development side, which I love. And I think that has to be a staple in any kind of hitting academy. It can't be just about taking the parents' money for, and not saying they all do this, but taking the parents' money just to have a travel team to go out and play and things like that. There has to be a foundation to that. If I'm paying as a parent $200 a month or $300 a month or $400 or whatever, I mean, I've heard some crazy amounts. My kids better be getting something other than just exposure, right? Because exposure there's a lot of travel teams out there. So what would be your advice for other hitting academies? It could be one just getting off the ground or thinking about getting off the ground, or maybe one that's been going for maybe a year or two. What's your biggest advice? Or how about this? What's your advice on the biggest mistake you see some of these hitting academies making in the beginning, like top two or one biggest mistake?
Yeah, I believe that I would, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, I want to create a relationship with my player, and I want them to understand that I'm invested in with what they want to do, to help them improve. And so for me, logging just everything is a little bit slower. Some days it is. Does that mean then that we can just go do a classroom day where we want to discuss a little bit more before we go put it into operation? Yeah, we do that. So, but I want them to see the breadcrumbs that they've laid down as they continue to improve, to develop their skill. And for us, I just look and go, we need to understand how to play baseball. So what does that mean? So to be prepared to do these travel things, that is a huge undertaking. And I have done that this summer. I have traveled pretty extensively to watch some high caliber players. And at the end of the day, I am going to say, if I saw 450 teams play, and if that's 6,000 players, 50 are phenomenal. 50 of them, 50. Everybody else, and I didn't see a bad player. And I'm being honest, I didn't see a bad player, but I saw like 5,950 guys that all looked alike. So I tell my guys every day, be uncommon. And I want them to be aggressive and to stay away from passive attitudes. So I want them to be aggressive, make mistakes and being earnest, learn from them. And, that's why I'm there to help guide them to say, hey, it's okay that we fell down here today. Just keep at it. So,
I love that. And I think the more, especially if 2020 has taught us anything, and the more I see it, almost the biggest skills that you can we can instill in our baseball and softball players are two things, and they both start with the same letter. And I know you love this, you appreciate that, is courage and critical thinking.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's what you're saying, courage and critical thinking.
Yeah. Every day, because one of my weaknesses, I don't know how to think well. Well, and I'm being honest. Like, I mean, I see it, but then because I am aware of that weakness, that's why I seek guys like you out. So I say, okay, you go do the lifting, because I'm not smart enough to understand that. But it's funny when that begins to happen, because then I get like light bulb moments on a pretty regular basis, and it's oh yeah, okay, now I get it. And then the movement begins, and something else happens, and it's right. And so so right now it's just, I took for granted that we're discussing as we get into the fall here. I saw 6,000 guys. I didn't see anybody could hit a curveball. And it's like, how are we not able to hit a curveball? Right. And so I took for granted that they did the things that I did. So when we're talking visual data, just actual visual data collections, I find out that they're in too narrow a box. They have no idea of how the ball's moving in space and time, the control of the space in front of them. And so, yeah, so sometimes I go, oh my goodness. So now I have to step back, and that's what we are doing, right now, planning on, in the next couple of weeks to undergo that as a major educational component. And that would be your visual planning.
Yeah. So, I love that. And we have a very co-friend in Perry Husband. And, you talk about seeking people out smarter than you. So talk a little bit about, so a lot of what you're talking about is in that Perry sphere, right? Yeah. So how are you guys applying that?
Yeah. So when I talk about like visual planning, I will say this, and I'm pretty sure I got this from Perry, and so Perry is effective velocity. Hitting is a guess for those of you who are
.com.
Look him up. Yep. So he has some theories, I believe very valid theories, tested theories. It's the hallmark of how I instruct. When I began to use the what I would call right now, I use the phrase right now, hit hard, whatever. It's a mnemonic that Perry uses when stating do only one thing. Understand location, understand shape, understand the velocity of the pitch. Now, what I'm seeing is, so when this gets combined with the idea of the visual, what is the shape that I'm looking for? How should that look? What is it actually? Now, it's almost instantly, guys are coming back with information. I've had kids that have never given me one good sentence of good feedback. And now they go a little bit wider, and they're saying, oh, well, I can see that where that fastball is coming all the time. He said, and plus you tip off your curveball. I say, tip off my curveball. They said, yeah, you lean forward on your curve rather than pulling to the side a little bit. I
love it.
Yeah. And these are kids that good hitters, but have always had that trouble. And that's the thing that I've seen with, especially, and I deal a lot with 18, 17, 16, all the way down to 10-year-olds. That's the bulk of who we're working. And yet they know curveballs coming, and yet they still can't hit it. And that's what I saw a lot of and such. So, so now when I take those components, those visual components, with their background that they have and what EV is, all of a sudden that's like the brick and mortar. I mean, there are no cracks right now. And I know that there are, I just don't know what they are yet. So now we go back and now we test again. Yep. A la Joey Myers, a la hitting performance lab. Well, very seriously. Right.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And over the last, it seems like every year there's some sort of, you talk about the aha moment, and in our system, and we've there's usually it was used to be in the mechanics side of things. There's this aha moment, and so we start working with some new stuff and doing that swing experimentation, and then we finally evolve it to a point to where it's like, this is solid, and this is it's consistent with the success my hitters are getting. This last year, it was almost like it wasn't the physical mechanical aha moment. It was more of we call them hitting strategies. So we have 6 of them, and what it is I teach my hitters that there's 3 dimensions to hitting. There's the vertical component, so the pitch can go up or down in the zone. There's the horizontal component, which is the depth of the pitch, right? Inside, middle, and away. And then there's the Perry Husband EV dimension, which is the timing or the speed of the pitch, or the shape, like you're talking about. And people out there don't know what Bill's talking about is the shape of the pitch, the shape the pitch is taking, or we could argue the shape that it's coming out of the hand, or where the arm slot is, and all that kind of stuff. But there's 2 out of, I think we have about 6. I just added a 2-strike approach, and has nothing to do with physical adjustments. Like, we're not choking up, we're not going wide with our feet, and all the things that coaches teach, and I've taught too, but I don't really do that. We always say that if you're going to use a 2-strike swing, if you're going to make those physical adjustments, that you have to practice that in the cage. You can't just practice your normal swing and then in the game, 2-strike adjustment, and then go straight to that, because you're not practicing it. So the top 2 that we use, so the 2-strike is what we just added recently. But the first one is adjusting verticals. We call them verticals, not launch angles, because you know how coaches love that word, launch angle, some of them. Yes. So we say adjusting to, like what Perry says, hit it back. We call it hitting back through the tube, but he says hitting it back through that little donut that he has that marker at 10 to 15 degrees. And so you're making your adjustments above and below. So if you hit a ground ball, trying to hit a fly ball next time. If you hit a fly ball, trying to hit a ground ball next time, trying to get it to go right back through, right? So that's number 1. And then number 2 is our middle away, middle up, or middle away, middle in, middle up, middle down approach, where we're adjusting our barrel path to middle away, middle down, which is very, very similar, but it's different than middle in, middle up. And those 2 alone, I tell my hitters, I said, I was a 250 career hitter in college. Those 2 alone have nothing to do with mechanics, but those 2 alone, those 2 hitting strategies, I would have hit 100 points higher for sure in my career. I would have hit 350 at Fresno State, in my career doing that. Do you guys do? So you're talking about these hitting strategies. What are some things you guys do to practice that?
Yeah, well, so number 1, I would say, outside of, and I look at younger kids a little bit different than I look at 12-year-olds, a little bit older. So there's a different way that we would approach them. So first thing I want them to do is just be able to hit it hard and hit it far. So I really don't get locked into a whole lot of mechanical work. So there's always time towards that. Right. So the very first thing that we'll do is we'll set targets so that we can get feedback. And it's the one thing in baseball that I think is lacking, is that is the understanding of how do I obtain feedback. And so with the kids, we always use every kid has a bucket. Coach has a bucket everywhere, and the coach goes crazy at some point when everybody's shooting basketballs.
You're right.
Right. So one day I was watching that, and it sort of struck me. It's like, and yet here they are playing like this random game with their buddy as they're trying to put balls back in the bucket. And it was like, that's the feedback that I want you to understand. And so now we have very distinct targets, so that if I were to ask them, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to hit? If you're going to hit that target with the ball off the barrel of your bat, what does it look like? So, and again, this goes back to Perry, and I would say the use of imagination, understanding what type of swing gives you that. It's amazing what the brain will do. And it just brings them to that. So we're always getting feedback based on what their intended goal was. And it's pretty, when it's used over and over, it's pretty easy to see when they're using their mnemonic, when they're using hit hard or right now, and when they're not. Because I think most ball players think, to me, the fallacy is the foul ball that's straight back, and everybody says, oh, you're right on it. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. And we'll measure that out. In order for that ball to go directly back, that means I'm like probably on my back hip and maybe a little underneath it. And I'm thinking, and there are my hands. Where are my hands, Joe? And I'm thinking I'm like a foot, 18 inches out in front of me. Well, when I do that and I show them that, and I just mark that with baseball, it's anywhere from 33 to 36 inches off.
Right.
That is a bundle of distance in speed. They're not close. And so, yeah. So what I need for them to understand is some of the stuff they've heard all along isn't really true. And for baseball players, they want to make small incremental adjustments. And so I always tell them I always tell them the story when I was younger. My dad would come home from work and I would have beat him home 10 minutes from school. And I always had my 8-track cassette player on. So, I don't want to date myself. So
I had one too.
Hey, I'd have it at 8. My dad would come to the bed, back to the bedroom. He'd say, "Hey, can you turn that down?" I'd take it to 7. And he'd come back about 10 minutes later and turn it down to 4 and say, "I thought I asked you to turn that down." And, and I said, "Well, I did." "Well, not enough." And that's what I think, right. And getting the kids to understand how big are the adjustments, how big, and we talked about this, and you and I and Perry, we talked about this, like when that barrel enters to when that barrel exits, it's typically 6 miles, mile an hour of velocity that the barrel stays in the strike zone and before it enters and out. And if that pitcher can beat that, plus or minus, faster or slower from pitch to pitch, 5, 6, 7 mile an hour, we're going to struggle all day long at the plate. And so that's what I think overall, that's that's number one, especially with my older guys, that I try to get them to understand. And then, and only then, because when I become efficient, if I change one thing, I change everything. Now the efficiency starts to work for me. So, but just, so that's probably number one for us, is just getting on time. That's, so what I tell a beginning instructor or only a year in, get your kids a quick win. And the biggest way I can tell you is off the fingertips, right as they're hitting it now, hit hard, hit now, whatever 2 positive, strong words that they are to a target. And
when you say right now, so that for those that don't know Perry stuff, what Bill's saying is, like you said, out of the fingertips, the hitter starts just saying right, and then now is at contact. So they're actually visual, or they're mouthing, saying that word right now. So it gives like Bill said, a measurement of that third dimension of the pitch.
And I want my guys to dance a lot. I mean, they joke about it, we laugh about it, but yet at the end of the day, there's rhythm, there's tempo that occurs, and it's part of what I want them to take in. And I think maybe in this day and age, I think that's been lost to a degree, not because it was intended or it's stupid idea or whatever. It's just that I think the lack of free play is no longer there, where kids would get together for 5, 6 hours every day with no adults around, and they're being allowed to experiment and to try different things. And none of that happens, or at least it doesn't happen to the degree it used to, for a lot of societal reasons. And so then I think a little bit what happens, everything's organized, and a lot of instruction is just maybe ill-used words, ill-advised words,
mechanized, internal, like too machine-like. So that when the concept of hitting a curve, I'll go back to that. The concept of hitting a curve is look for the rotation. Well, look, I think all those answers were, I sort of noticed that, let's look for rotation. And now we're so focused in tight on trying to see what the ball is. We have no
context of where the ball is in space and time. And, and so a whole bunch of things go on there, but
yeah,
that's just an idea of it for me.
Well, and that's, you said that's one of the cues that I remember getting thrown around for the curveball, hitting it. And then the other thing was staying inside it and keep your hands inside the curveball. And there were just things that once it dawned on me that there is a different barrel path, middle in versus middle away. It dawned on me that staying inside it wasn't very effective at the curveball that was coming, say righty, that was coming at the hitter and then breaking into the middle of the plate. Like if you stayed inside that thing, if you hit it, it's not going to be hit very hard. So if you watch the Trouts and the guys that just smash these things, you'll see that barrel, instead of dumping in the zone early, you'll see it carry high a little bit longer and will dump in later. So what they're doing, and Bonds was probably one of the best at this. Many out there remember watching Bonds hitting bombs into the bay at fastballs that were up, almost seemed like it was going to hit his elbow guard or his arm guard, big old giant bionic thing he had on. And he was able to get to it at 95 up and in. And same thing with the curveballs, lefty curveballs coming at him. And he just spun right on him. And it's not so much the rotation of Bonds's body as more of where his barrel path was to that curveball. So there, like you said, that's one of our strategies too. That's the third strategy we have. We have the adjusting verticals, adjusting horizontals, and then curveballs. So we hunt specific curveballs in zones. And like you said, the younger the player, little different approach, right? You don't want to get too detailed, and those pitchers aren't as good with their command and things like that. But when they get into 12-year-old, that sixth grade year, those pitchers start getting pretty good. They have a pretty good handle of that 46-foot distance there, or 50 feet, whatever pony leagues and stuff like that. And so they start to get a little bit more command until that mound backs up a little bit. And then you see like about a year or two where they struggle, but that curveball approach, I completely agree with you, because what's funny is that I have one of my hitters right now who it's going to be so unfair because he's got one more year at Little League, and he's somewhat of a big kid. He's taller kid, but I mean, he's come a long way in a year. He's worked really his butt off. And now we got his mechanics, took about 6 to 8 months during this 2020 year, got his mechanics to a good spot to where everything's pretty effective now. I mean, we're still working on stuff from time to time, but we really got to focus on the strategies. And ideally in Little League, what happens is pitchers will try and get you out with the fastball, and they might move it in and out. Most of the time it's away and down and stuff like that, but the faster pitchers will come in. And if you can't hit it, then you keep throwing it. And so this particular hitter smashes it. And because we've equipped them with the curveball approach, the next logical step for these pitchers is to go curveball, right? And because they're used to, like you said, 6,000 players, 400 or 500 teams you're watching, and you're seeing a struggle with the curveball, because all they got to do is throw it. It doesn't matter where the curveball is at in Little League. It's effective because the hitters have never seen it before, or they don't have a good approach like you're talking about, and they swing and miss. Well, what happens when that pitcher sees a hitter who actually has a curveball approach, and then he starts smashing the curveball? And it's like, the coaches, the players, they don't know what to do.
Yeah. It's called intentional.
Right.
Put him on.
Put him on. Yeah. They start throwing around the zone, hoping he's going to go outside the zone.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think, that's the aspect that's been lost a little bit with the lack of free play.
Yeah.
And so to reintroduce some of these concepts, and am I the guy for that? Not to demonstrate it. Right?
Unless you're hitting a hockey puck.
Yeah, that's right. Even then, I'm not the guy to demonstrate it. And but that's just as important too, Joey, is that it's modeled correctly. Because I mean, oh heck, I just remember playing as a kid, and you took your favorite team and you knew how every kid on that team hit, and you hit left-handed and you hit right-handed, and you looked like Willie Stargell on this one, and it was Roberto on that one, and Davey Cash on this one. And yet, it's almost the Ripken boy, Cal
Billy.
Ripken.
Cal
I'm
Ripken,
thinking Cal. Yeah, I'm thinking Cal. I'm thinking Edgar Martinez. They might have had 15 or 20 different stances in the course of a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet we're telling guys, oh, you can't ever change. And it's like, yeah, you need to change.
Yeah.
So there's an evolving that has to happen. And so when you begin to when you begin to know what the pitcher's going to do before he does, and it's still not easy to hit, but boy, it becomes a little easier. And that's when you have guys that people are looking at going, wow, that guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And,
we say hitting isn't easy, but we can make it easier.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
and before I let you go here, because I want to be respectful of your time, you say the free play, and it's funny you say that, because we went a little independent with my son's baseball team this year. We went away from the league because I felt they didn't handle the whole 2020 thing very well. So I took our team. We had about 8 or 9 that decided to stay with us. And then we added about 4 or 5. So we had about 14, 15 hitters. So what we did when the season was done, and we got a few games, we played ourselves more than we played a little bit more sandlot than anything. But I told the parents it's probably what was going to happen, just because you had teams still in leagues and it was going to be hard to put games together and all that kind of stuff. And to tell you the truth, we weren't ready for tournament play. We had some guys that they were pretty rough around the edges. But what we elected to do is, even when the season was done, we just ramped down how many practices we had during the week. We went from 3 down to 2 and then down to 1 during the summer. And what I did during the summer was we switched our practices to the morning. So it was cooler because it gets super hot here. And what we did was we did some street wiffle ball. We just introduced and we played games like we had. The other team would be fielding and they have to throw to the base like normal baseball. So we get to learn some rules there that we couldn't accomplish in a smaller area, right? Because we're just playing between 2 gutters, right? We got the other side and then we got the plate on the sidewalk, and then we got our little what are they, pink bases out, orange bases out and stuff. And then we did some 2-strike innings. We would do a normal inning where they had their 0-0, and then we had an 0-2 inning where they had to swing because I think they were getting a little bit too passive. So we did 2-strike, and then at the end, the last we were supposed to have one this week, but I canceled it because our schools start next week. But we started to do home run derby the last probably 3 or 4 weeks, and we just had them out. We carved them into 2 teams. We set up our thing, just things that you and I did as kids growing up, just in the streets playing ball. That free play.
Yeah, it's so important because for me, they're getting so much feedback that's not coming from an authoritative figurehead or such, or however they're perceiving it.
Yep.
And Joey, I'll throw this out there as well. Typically, most of the issues that I really see with my kids, and not through and through, but I'd say an overwhelming majority come from kids who are trying to perform for their parents. Come from kids who they are tying their love for them into their success at the plate. Right. And, and that's, I don't want that.
Breaks my heart. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so sometimes that becomes a process where we're just, a lot of times I'll have to rip kids all the way back down to the ground. We'll go backwards before we go forward. But once we go forward and they've got a good feeling and a good understanding, and they're playing the game because it's their game and not my game, they're far better off for it. So,
I love that. That's great advice. And that's great for coaches, instructors, academy owners to look out for, and especially academy owners, because they have so many kids in their system. And that's the thing, right? Coaches generally have a team or 2 that they're coaching. So they're, depending on what level they're at, it could be 15 kids, could be 30 kids, right? But you got the academy owners that can have hundreds of kids. And so they're in a position where they can affect a lot of kids. So it's good for them to know that. So thank you for sharing that. So, all right, Bill, where can people find you? If they want to get more information, where can they find you?
I would just say, go over to the Facebook. If you have it, if you believe in it, it's TUE Good Sports. I don't know anything about the websites or anything like that, so I don't do that. But if you get over there it stands for the Ultimate Edge, TUE Good Sports. And then there's also Better Ball Player. And so that's where we typically do some of our virtual stuff. So that's
very
where
cool.
You and I meet. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And any kind of new things on the horizon for you that you're putting together? Any kind of virtual summits or?
I have one coming up here at the end of August, and it's actually on crushing the curve. So that's why it was topical in the top of my head there. Yeah. For that one. But yeah, so that is foremost on what we're doing. We're prepping for the fall here as we get into it, and yeah, but that's the biggest item on the list. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, all right, Bill. Well, thanks for your time here today, and we'll have to do a take 2 at some point, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Hope I didn't put too many people to sleep. God bless you. Bless you, Joey. Thank you.